Good evening. I'm Leland and Liberty. Welcome to the program. President Biden heads to Delaware for R&R ahead of 2022, filled with trying to accomplish most of what he had hoped to accomplish in 2021. That said, the week gives him and the White House a chance to reset and the American people a chance to reflect. Here's what the president wants you thinking about.
We have passed more major legislation than anybody in their first year ever. And I still think we'll be able to get a significant amount of what we need to get done.
Reasonable people can agree it's going to be a lot harder to get stuff done in 2022. The president's poll numbers are 10 or more points lower than when he took office, and Democrats in Congress now face midterms in swing districts and states where moderates worry about supporting a progressive agenda. That said, the president comes back in January of 2022 with a big stick to swing at Republicans, the expiring child tax credits. Nearly 36 million families benefit from child tax credit payments that are between $3,000 and $3,600 a year yearly, but it is sent out in monthly checks. Those checks keep millions of kids out of poverty and with food in their mouths. But right now, the program is on hold because of the failure of Mr. Biden's Build Back Better. We bring in Niall Standage, White House columnist for our partners at The Hill. Niall, good to see you, my friend. I appreciate it. If you are Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff, spending the week reflecting and looking forward, what do you view as your opportunities?
I think a couple of things. I mean, you mentioned the child tax credit. That's very important if they could get some kind of measure passed to extend that. But really, people like Ron Klain have always thought that this president is going to be judged on two interrelated things, COVID and the economy. Now, obviously, we have this variant at the moment. There's a whole lot of debate about that. That's a separate issue. But the dealing with the pandemic and the related impacts on the economy are really what the White House is focused on.
Impact on the economy. Obviously, we've had inflation go sky high over the past year, the highest it's been in nearly 40 years. Price increases overall, food up 6.5%, new cars up 11%, lodging up 25%, same with utilities. Food price increases, obviously things people are going to be talking about during their Christmas dinners. Sirloin steak up 31%, eggs 29%, bacon 28%. Do they feel as though that inflation is going to be the bigger source of their problems, or COVID over the next year?
I think over the next year, I think inflation is probably the bigger problem. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is, as you just said, Leland, inflation is something that is felt in a very immediate, very urgent, very visceral way. Your grocery bill goes up, or it costs you more to fill the tank in your car. But the other point about inflation is it's terribly difficult to get it under control without putting the brakes on the economy. As you and your audience know, the easiest way to deal with inflation is for the central bank, the Federal Reserve, to hike interest rates. But that has all kinds of effects that are themselves detrimental.
Thinking about COVID, and obviously the president probably wishes he could have those words back in January or July when he said we're going to declare independence from the virus. If all of a sudden Omicron runs through the U.S. population the way it has in South Africa, steep up, steep down, minimal hospitalizations, best case scenario, does that set him free from COVID in February or March and ready to move on to 2022?
It very well could, and if it does, I think the political ramifications of that are huge. You and I both know how fast the political atmosphere can change. You just need one big event to either break in your favor or against you, and it can change the whole political landscape. If you're right about that idea that Omicron could go very steeply up, very steeply down again, and by spring, the American people feel definitively that the pandemic is behind them, I think there will be a significant political dividend there for the president.
Yeah, and there does seem now to be a willingness by the White House to try and move on from case counts and declare victory over keeping vaccinated people alive and then let everybody else fend for themselves. This was President Biden last week talking about 2022, where he is not on the ballot. Take a listen.
We have to keep making the case
And if we do, I believe we're going to win. Let me say this again for the president. We're going to win in 2022.
You never hear a president say, well, the midterms are going to be really rough, stand by. That said, is it better for these moderate Dems in swing districts, the 70 or so vulnerable House seats, for the president to be super involved over the next 8 months, or to take a step back because of his unpopularity?
A lot of that depends partly on the geographic and demographic makeup of some of those districts. But look, if his approval rating stays in the low 40s, which is where it is right now, that's going to be a big problem. That causes a drag on some of these candidates. And, we saw even back in November the fact that President Biden did not really bring any advantage to Terry McAuliffe's attempt to win the governorship in Virginia. So I think a lot of moderate Democrats are going to want to go their own way if President Biden's approval ratings are still where they are now by the middle of next year.
Yeah. Hey, Niall, I want to say thank you very much. Your reporting over the past year has really been terrific. We've obviously really enjoyed having you on the program, and there's going to be a lot more ahead.
Always a pleasure, Leland.
Yeah.
Take care.
Merry Christmas to you and yours. Enjoy it. As we've been reporting, the scale and speed at which China is growing in power and influence is truly stunning, and it's accelerating from 2021 into 2022. From a military perspective, the country's advances in missile technology and nuclear weapons have triggered serious concerns that a shift in the global balance of power is truly underway, from the West to Beijing. President Xi has ordered his nation's armed forces to modernize within 15 years and to be capable of fighting and winning, in their words, any war by 2049. Just this week, China warned the U.S. that the communist unification of Taiwan was, quote, unstoppable by any force. Those are fighting words. Beyond Taiwan, China is rapidly moving into Africa and Latin America. It has laid the groundwork there for decades. Its advances in technology are hard to fathom. Here's a headline that caught our eye. Several U.S. counterintelligence officials, claim that China is weaponizing biotechnology and developing brain control weaponry for potential offensive use. A senior official also claimed that China was using emerging biotechnologies to develop future military applications, including gene editing, human performance enhancement, and brain-machine interfaces. Beijing's influence is growing in other ways, too. Their entertainment and sports complexes are increasingly popular around the world. Early next year, Beijing hosts the Olympics. Again, now we ask, how do we make 2022 the year of America, not the year of China? For that, we bring in former Green Beret, participated in the capture of Saddam Hussein, Special Operations Flight Leader, member of the U.S. Army Rangers, Mark Green, Congressman from the great state of Tennessee. Congressman, it's good to see you as well. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good to see you. Not a Green Beret, by the way.
Yeah, no, I was going to correct myself on that. Many other accolades. Flew with the Green Berets, among other things. I want to get back to what President Xi said. China warned the U.S. that the communist reunification of Taiwan was, quote, unstoppable by any force. Does that mean the U.S. needs to start threatening force in response?
Well, I do believe that Joe Biden should step away from what has been our strategy for many years, strategic ambiguity, a question mark whether the United States would respond. As long as 60% of the semiconductors are made in Taiwan, we need to tell China we will fight to keep them from taking or seizing that country. It's a no-brainer strategically. We need to just come out and say it. And I will say the president has done a little bit of that, but each time he makes those statements, his administration walks them back. So typical of the foreign policy of this administration. But yeah, strategic ambiguity needs to go away. China needs to know we will defend Taiwan.
I don't need to tell you that. That means American boys and women are on the line then. Your son, who's been through Ranger School, is in the Army, very well could be fighting, and there will be people dying on the beaches of Taiwan. Why should American boys die on the beaches of Taiwan?
Imagine if China has control of 75% of the semiconductors in the world. I mean, it is a strategic national security imperative. Our weapon systems, our military systems, our cars, our toaster ovens need semiconductors. We cannot allow them to seize Taiwan. It is a strategic imperative for the United States to push back. And we must tell them that we will. Look, if China could take it, they would have already done so. They don't have the capability right now to do so if it's clear that the United States will stop them, and we can.
Well, we certainly can now. President Xi has ordered his nation's armed forces to modernize within 15 years, be capable of fighting and winning any war by 2049. Are we risking a point in the not-so-distant future that we will not be able to defeat them?
I think we need to make some big steps. And in dialoguing with Secretary Austin, he has the mindset to make those steps. We just need to convince the administration and the Democrats in Congress to fund those changes. For example, we don't need more aircraft carriers. We need more submarines. If you want to, block 90-mile distance from China to Taiwan, you need to fill the straits with submarines. Our capability with submarines is vastly better than the Chinese, and we need to double down on that. And it's that shift in naval mindset. We need more ships. You remember the Jaws movie, we need a bigger boat? Well, we need more ships. And that's what's got to happen at the administration. They're going to make the decision to do it, and Congress has got to fund it.
Yeah, you think about the military comparison now as when it comes to ships already, China has a slightly larger Navy, not more sophisticated than the United States. Certainly more people in uniform, not necessarily as well trained, on and on and on. You think about confronting Beijing and their rise on everything other than the military. We've seen rumblings from the administration they're ready to, but not ready to sort of try and confront them on a global stage or confront their influence. I'm thinking about that China is selling ballistic missile technology to the Saudis. The United States is not. China is building ports in the Caribbean. The United States is not.
So Joe Biden hasn't made a good decision on foreign policy yet. And if you look particularly at the Middle East, since you mentioned, the Saudis and the missiles that the Chinese are now building for the Saudis, the failure in Afghanistan, creating a terrorist, basically haven and training camp, the refusal to give the Saudi Arabians precision missiles while Iran is launching from the Houthis sites in Yemen rockets into Saudi Arabia. Basically, he's pushing away our friends and embracing our enemies, Iran. He wants that Iran deal so bad that he'll push Saudi Arabia into the arms of the Chinese. And it's the same with the UAE deal. He refused to give them. President Trump had approved F-35 fighter jets for the UAE guys. And look, they signed the Abraham Accords. They're with us with Israel. And here this president refuses to give them those weapon systems. So what do? They throw the deal in the garbage and they go buy airplanes from France, which I guess is a quid pro quo for us and what we did with their submarines. But, this president can't seem to get anything right.
That perhaps is on the strategic or the long view. Obviously, the Chinese play the 100-year game.
Sure.
Vladimir Putin plays a much tighter game here, and he's got 250,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. The ground is about frozen there, which would make it a much easier time right now or in the coming weeks to invade eastern Ukraine. Take a listen to Jen Psaki talking about Vladimir Putin playing the victim and saying why he needs to invade Ukraine.
Well, facts are a funny thing, and facts make clear that the only aggression we're seeing at the border of Russia and Ukraine is the military buildup by the Russians and the bellicose rhetoric from the leader of Russia.
You and I both studied Russian disinformation campaigns. I was in Ukraine for the last invasion. And it seems as though every time the Russians make one of these sort of false flag accusations and play the victim, we just play right into their hand.
Well, I think this time Anthony Blinken has taken them serious. I heard some of his comments that he made to the Russian foreign minister about the buildup, and they were very strong. We made it very clear we will not tolerate that invasion. So I'm comfortable with where that sits right now, and everything Jen Psaki just said, I agree with. So you're right. I mean, it's Vladimir Putin who's doing the disinformation. But so far, we've told them very clearly we will not stand for it.
I want to put a bow on this as we end the year. Who's watching more closely? Putin, what we do about China in Taiwan, or China watching what we do about Putin in Ukraine?
A very good question. I think the near-term issue is Russia and Ukraine. And so Xi Jinping is watching very closely what happens. and hopefully the president's rhetoric will match what his actions are, and China will take note.
Yeah, we know that Xi and Putin have had this summit and said they have an alliance that is even stronger than a real alliance. So there you go.
Yeah.
Hey, Congressman, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Glad you're getting some time off with the family. And tell Mitchell wherever he is, we're awfully proud of him and grateful for his service, all right?
Thank you, brother. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Up next, new mandates in big cities. If it's an emergency like they say, why are they waiting weeks and weeks for the vaccine mandate? Plus, Border Patrol finds so-called stash houses. You're going to see the new lengths migrants are going to cross our southern border and the vigilante groups that are coming to stop them. That's the president explaining how his medical team never foresaw a fast-spreading variant of COVID as a possibility. Never mind, experts talked about just this event since the start of the pandemic, and today, the White House admitted they haven't even signed contracts for the 500 million tests President Biden promised to mail out after the first of the year. So if you think that current testing lines for PCR tests and empty shelves at Walgreens and CVS for the at-home tests are going to get better anytime soon, think again. Omicron is doubling every day. Great news, it appears to be far milder. The Daily Mail reports 2/3 of new COVID hospital patients in England only tested positive after being admitted for different illnesses. Official data shows amid mounting evidence that Omicron is indeed milder. Thank God. Still, it spreads like wildfire, prompting mayors in 3 major American cities, D.C., Boston, and Chicago, to institute vaccine mandates for normal activities, eating at restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, sporting events, and the like. They say these mandates are designed to save lives, slow the spread of Omicron, and free up hospital beds. It's an emergency. They are using emergency powers. And of course, the timing, though, doesn't make a lot of sense. The mandates don't take effect till next year. For D.C., it's the middle of January. Chris Hahn is a man of action. He does things right now, emergency or not. Host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, former advisor to Chuck Schumer, joins us now. You and I may differ, Chris, on the idea of mandates, but I'm guessing you don't like that they're waiting till the middle of January for these any more than I do.
No, I think the middle of January is way too long. I don't think they should take effect immediately. You got to give people a window to get vaccinated. The point of these mandates is to encourage people to get vaccinated so that we increase the vaccinated population and decrease the impact of the virus. When you get vaccinated, if you get the virus, you're very unlikely to get serious illness, and you're very, very unlikely to die from it.
Right, but
so
if this is
important that we keep.
Yeah, if this is truly an emergency, though, right? This is an emergency. You say if you're vaccinated, you can go eat tomorrow. The police are going to be out there checking vaccine cards, and if you get vaccinated tomorrow morning, you can go get dinner tomorrow night. But you do it right now. How do you justify using emergency powers and not putting things into effect for a month?
Again, you got to give people a window. The point of the mandate is to get people vaccinated. If you just say vaccinate now or not, you're going to have more people saying, forget it, I can't do it, it's not going to happen. If you give people a window to get vaccinated, 10 days, 15 days, I think that's tops. I think then you have people rushing to get vaccinated. You increase your vaccinated population. It's good for everybody.
It's interesting. After January 1st, early January, the Supreme Court takes up the Biden employer mandate. 50% favor right now, 47% oppose. Almost everything in America right now, the country's split. Brings up an important point. And this sort of goes to the politics of COVID. If President Biden really wanted people to get vaccinated, wouldn't he have a domestic flying mandate for vaccination? Wouldn't he tie vaccines to food stamps and Social Security and other federal benefits? That'd really motivate people, wouldn't it? Why not do it?
Well, I would, without a doubt, have a mandate on flying, because flying, you're going to have to go through airports. There's lots of risk of contracting and spreading the virus. Plus, people who fly, they have the ability, they have the funds to kind of do that. I wouldn't tie it to food stamps. People got to eat in this country. And quite frankly, you don't necessarily need to come in contact people with eat these days. So there's a benefit and a cost associated with. So I don't know why he hasn't mandated it on airplanes. And I get it. Airplane air is filtered. There are a lot of reasons why airplanes are very safe, but airports are not. And I think that if you're going to be flying, you're going to be traveling, the president has the right to do that right now. He should be mandating. As for the Supreme Court case, I'm pretty confident that this Supreme Court, which has deferred to presidents on issues of health, safety, and national security, will defer to this president on this. And he will, the OSHA mandate for workplaces will be upheld.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. And then, boy, what a mess it's going to be when OSHA tries to put the rule on employers and then employers try to figure out a way to implement it in the like. But back to this issue of the mandates on airplanes. Okay, it's about protection, not persuasion or punishment. Fine. But again, why isn't he doing this? He speaks so strongly about COVID and about vaccines. Why not do something so simple that he absolutely has the power to do, like a domestic flying mandate? Is it politics?
I honestly don't understand it at all. It's not, to me, the politics is bad for him not doing it. I've said this on your show and on other shows, on other networks many times. Mr. President, mandate vaccines on airplanes now. You have the power to do that. Now, like I said, I understand. The power, but
does he have the political capital right now to do it? Because it's controversial.
Look, anybody who is opposed to vaccine mandates is not voting for Joe Biden anyway. So I don't understand why he would wait to do it. Okay, there's no political downside for him. In fact, if you look at his poll numbers, where he's lost the most ground is among Democrats who want to see him doing more with vaccine mandates. That is where he's losing the most ground in polling right now. He's at 80% among Democrats. I'm sorry, his numbers are never going to be good among Republicans, and he's only moved a little tiny bit among independents. Most of his losses have become with his own party, people who will come home and vote for him in 3 years. But right now, that's where his numbers are.
A big part of his argument, right, was that we're going to be the adults in the room. We are going to come get COVID under control. Obviously, for a lot of reasons, that didn't happen. Some in his control, some not. This video produced at the White House yesterday caught our eye. Take a look.
Fill up the stockings. I might be rushing things, but deck the halls again now.
That's the Norwood Health dancing nurses with the First Lady. I promised my boss I would make no smart aleck comments this week, so I will defer to you for any thoughts.
Well, look, man, it's Christmas. Can we give him a pass on some schlack? I guess. What are we looking at? What's the word I'm looking for? I'm missing it. Can we give him a pass on some schmaltz? Because that's a little schmaltzy. I get it. But it is what it is. Happy holidays. They're wearing their masks. They seem to be 6 feet apart. I'm sure they're all vaccinated. So Merry Christmas.
They are? Well, and a good place to leave it. Merry Christmas, Chris, to you and yours. A Happy New Year. We're certainly better off for having you with us this year, and we're looking forward to next.
Me too, man.
Yeah, all the best. The explosion of illegal immigration we saw this year is likely to continue next unless there are massive policy changes. So far, the Biden administration shows no sign of willing to confront the problem from either the political or law enforcement side. Over the past week, authorities have found several migrant stash houses in the El Paso, Texas area alone, leading to dozens of arrests. Over the past week, authorities have found several migrant stash houses, not only in El Paso, but up and around the Rio Grande Valley. Migrant encounters by month. Fiscal year 2022, you can see it's almost double. This headline from the Los Angeles Times: Texas militia sanctioned by sheriff seeks government support to halt flow of immigrants. Militias have staked out the border for decades, but Patriots for America has managed to do what many of others not: patrolled armed with landowners' permission in concert with law enforcement. That militia, Patriots for America, says all members are vetted with background checks, and the group is funded by donations. The militia says when they encounter migrants, they don't detain them. They instead call the sheriff. One sheriff said when he started working with the militia, he got pushback from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Joining us now from the DPS, Lieutenant Chris Oliveris. Lieutenant, good to see you. Boy, I get that it's a complicated situation. Does armed gangs of civilians do you guys any good?
Well, Leland, I can tell you right now that, as far as in regards to militias, we don't support that type of activity, especially when we're talking about the current border crisis. I think right now what's happening around the border on these ranches needs to be left to the experts, to law enforcement personnel who have the capabilities, who have the technology, who have the training to deal with this flow of illegal immigrants that are coming across. But again, that's going to be left up to the sole responsibility of those ranch owners and the sheriffs in those counties. But again, Texas DPS does not support any type of activity involving militias.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I want to put that chart back up again because we didn't have a chance to talk about it, which is the difference between 2020 and 2021 in terms of the number of migrants flowing across. It's sort of stunning how much higher it is as you look. This would be the question. Is there any reason to think it will change?
Leland, I don't believe it's going to change. And I feel, honestly, I can strongly believe that going into 2022, this new year coming up, we're going to see significant increases of illegal immigrants coming across. We know historically for the months of November, December, the numbers have always been low, but not this case this year for 2021. The numbers have been very significant. Also, what's more significant is the single adults coming across. We're seeing a vast amount of single adults that are crossing over the runners that we refer them to, also on these ranches. You're seeing 100+ groups on these ranches in the Del Rio sector. So the numbers continue to increase. So again, as far as the whole reinstatement of the Remain in Mexico policy, that still remains to be seen. It has not been effective at all. We're still seeing a significant amount of groups coming across, families, unaccompanied children, the single adults, not to mention human smugglers. We're seeing an increase in human smugglers that are also coming across, coming to the Rio Grande Valley, to the Del Rio, to the southern border to become drivers to smuggle illegal immigrants. Police chases have gone up, stash houses have gone up. So we're seeing an increase in criminal activity along the southern border. So again, going into 2022, I do not see this slowing down whatsoever.
It's stunning that you think it can actually get worse, because at some level you kind of have to wonder how many more people are there that can actually funnel up. The other issue, in addition to people, is drug seizures at the border, which has also gone up. 58,000 pounds of meth, 26,000 pounds of marijuana. There's pot everywhere, but 2,100 pounds of fentanyl. That might not sound like a lot, but 21 pounds of fentanyl can kill an enormous number of people.
You're right. So just to put that in perspective, what Texas DPS has seized since the start of 2021, we have seized 887 pounds of fentanyl, which equals to over 200 million lethal doses. So kind of put that in perspective, what the state has been able to seize statewide. And of course, when our troopers are out there seizing these are drugs that are coming through the ports of entry, coming across the river. But most importantly, these drugs are already broken down. They're in vehicles, concealed in vehicles, and then smuggled into larger metropolitan areas or other states. So again, we talk about fentanyl. We know how lethal this is, and that's why we really need to shift our focus when we talk about the mass migration, but shift to the focus now to really stress the importance of these criminal organizations and how they're taking over and how they have so much control, so much power right now because of this open border policy.
Yeah, you and I have been talking now for about 4 or 5 months, and it feels as though, and you'd be the expert on this, that the cartels are getting a lot more brazen in their willingness to fight and what their willingness to do. Is that because there's more opportunity, there's more people, there's more drugs, there's more money to fight over?
Of course, right now is the opportunity for them right now, because they know when there's a group or there's a large group of illegal immigrants coming across, we talk about the families, unaccompanied children, that distracts law enforcement, it ties up resources. So what that does is it allows the drug trafficking organizations to continue to pour the drugs across the river and to receive weapons and money that's going south into Mexico. So they take full advantage of this current border crisis, and they've been doing it from the very beginning, and it's only going to continue to escalate. And we're seeing it with the numbers. The data shows what's taking place, the drugs that are being seized, the money that's being seized, the weapons that are potentially going into Mexico that are being seized, these military-grade weapons, 50 caliber rifles that are being used by the cartels. So again, this is a great opportunity for them. They're taking full advantage of what's taking place, and it's only going to escalate.
Yeah, we just hope that it doesn't escalate to where those 50 cal weapons are used against you and your other troopers. Lieutenant, it's always good to see you. Thank you for taking time before Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Always a pleasure. Merry Christmas.
Good to see you, sir. Up ahead, critics have been pushing Donald Trump to be more vocal on vaccines. We're going to show you his surprising new comments, what that means for his influence over Republicans when we come back. Critics, as you probably have heard over the past few months, have been pushing former President Trump to be a more vocal advocate for vaccines, and he was quite clear in his interview with conservative commentator Candace Owens. Mr. Trump, of course, has left the door open to 2024. Maybe he'll run, maybe he won't. But what is certain is he will have a major impact on the midterms, especially the Republican primaries in 2022. We bring in Brad Blakeman, political consultant, professor, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, friend of the show. All right, Brad, does this go a long way to mending the MAGA traditional Republican fences, if you will?
Well, I don't know how much influence the former president, is going to have on the midterms, and here's why. People tend to visit him in Mar-a-Lago who are running in all parts of the country. He hasn't agreed so far to travel in behalf of any candidate. So you have to, in order to have the kind of influence you would need to have, especially by a former president or somebody coming in from the outside to help you in a district or a state, is you have to be in that state of consequence where the elections are being held. So that's number one. Number two is you got to have money. And if the president-elect former president is not willing to fundraise outside the state of Florida for candidates, I'm not so sure what effect his endorsement is going to be, just a blanket endorsement. So it remains to be seen how committed the former president is going to be in 2022. But so far, he has not had the kind of impact. Look at the race for governor in Virginia. None, really.
Well, that's because they didn't want him there, but that was in a general election. I've never known President Trump to shy away from a crowd or a rally. You have to think, like, if you take the Missouri Senate race, for example, if he endorses Eric Greitens, the former disgraced governor, and comes and does a couple of rallies for him, then it's over, right?
No, not necessarily. I don't think that the star power has.
So even in the primaries.
I really don't. I don't see it because he would have to commit to travel. He would have to commit to cutting ads, and I'm not so sure he's going to expend that kind of personal capital beyond Mar-a-Lago. So far, he has not done that for anybody.
Well, you think about the Georgia governor's race, though, where David Perdue came out and basically wrapped himself in the 2020 election fraud flag to carry the president's water on that. That's something that President Trump has been willing to talk about and get in there. You have to, if all of a sudden David Perdue takes on Brian Kemp, which he's going to, does he not get the MAGA vote at least in the primary on the election fraud issue?
I'm not so sure. I think he's sticking his neck way out very, very early. So I think you do it at your peril. I believe that the era of Trump is waning. I don't think he has that kind of effect even on primaries. And certainly if he doesn't have the effect on primaries, he's not going to have an effect on the general election.
You saw him in that clip with Candace Owens all of a sudden sort of start to take credit for the vaccines, talk about the vaccines, and then probably had something to do with his interview with Bill O'Reilly and how the dynamic changed. Majority of Republicans want Trump to run again. 60-40 yes, independents 25-73 no. Democrats don't want him to run at all. You could wonder if perhaps they really should want him to run again because they won last time. But nevertheless, does the president's moderation, if you will, at least on this issue, lead you to believe he's running for 2024?
I don't believe he's going to run in 2024. I think he's going to go right up to the line, and then when it comes time to file in the early states like Iowa and New Hampshire, I don't think he's going to do it. But why hurt your publicity by announcing that early? There's no benefit to doing that, so he needs to stay relevant. But I will say this, once you see other Republican governors, congressmen, senators, business people entering into New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina, Florida, and other states, you can be sure that they're not going to be scared off by Donald Trump. And I don't think the DeSantis's of the world, the Tim Scotts and others, are going to let the president shy them away from running.
Now, DeSantis, Tim Scott, maybe even somebody like a Greg Abbott.
Correct.
As we think about 2022, and obviously the former president's influence in 2022 and the favors he collects could affect 2024. A more visible and vocal Trump has potential to help Republicans in solid red states, but doom them in purple or blue ones. You brought up Virginia as a prime example of that. Yet control of the Senate hinges on results in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire, states Mr. Trump lost in. You're an old school moderate George W. Bush Republican. You served in his administration. How much fear is there among your comrades that President Trump getting involved in 2022 is going to wreck the chances in Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire?
It's real. Because like any politician, you know where you're welcome and you know where you're not. And the average politician doesn't want to go where they're not welcome. President Trump is an exception. He kind of welcomes that challenge. So, you know, it could be fraught with danger that if the president goes to places where he's just not going to be helpful. But again, I don't see the president President Trump traveling, the kind of mileage he's going to have to do in the many races that are being had, 435 and, you know, a third of the Senate. So he has to pick his battles. If he picks his battles and is helpful, more credit to him. But if he goes into places that he's not going to be helpful, then yeah, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, and you also have to wonder how much he's going to be able to hold himself away from endorsing candidates. I'm thinking about Eric Greitens, who Hugh Hewitt brought up as a real issue, or say a Herschel Walker in the Georgia Senate race, which he would love the adulation of showing up to a big crowd and endorsing them for the primary, who were going to have a really hard road, or who would have a very hard road, I should say, in the general.
Right, and we're seeing that the former president is not able to raise the kind of crowds that he was even a year ago. It's not happening, especially when you have to pay over $100 a seat.
Well said, nicely delivered, Brad. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks. We'll see you in the
Happy
new
holidays.
year. You too. Coming up, the inaugural Leland and Liberty Holiday Book Club. Our top picks, why, and what we'll be thinking about when we see you in 2022. We'll be right back. Important people, think popes, presidents, captains of industry, often end the year with a send-off. The White House typically releases what the president will be reading over Christmas break. Often CEOs will send out a favorite book, their own if they wrote one that year, to the white-collar crew, especially of their company. It's a bizarre way of trying to team build. Yes, Mr. CEO, I can't wait to spend my 1 week off reading whatever you paid someone to ghostwrite on leadership. I digress there. More established cable news guests would have spent the past month hawking their books as perfect Christmas books for perfect Christmas presents. Give us a couple of years, we'll be doing just that. The graphics department, however, came up with one better. Liberty and Leland's Holiday Book Club. She is literally the last guest of the year and was here for the first show. Liberty Vittert, professor of data science at Washington University, editor of the Harvard Data Science Review, and author herself for the first installment, we'll put the graphic up again, of Leland and Liberty's Holiday Book Club. Also my favorite sister. Liberty, good to see you. My first book, there it is, the graphics department got to have their laugh for the new year. Jay Wink, April 1865, an oldie but goodie, written about, and I hadn't really realized this, is why I put it on the list, how April 1865, that 1 month, was as pivotal as July of 1776 and probably as December 1941 was equally pivotal in saving the Union. The month that saved America, how close the Union came to dissolving, how Lee was told not to surrender and to instead fight a guerrilla war, and what he did to save. Eisenhower at ease. This is a personal favorite of our grandfather, Henry Holt, who was a huge fan of Dwight Eisenhower. At ease, stories I tell to friends. And you can only imagine or hope that Pop, our grandfather, would have been thinking about some of the stories in this book, and probably some of the stories he heard Eisenhower tell were in there as well. Yours, Liberty?
Absolutely. Is it my turn?
Yeah,
I was listening. I didn't realize it was my turn.
It's your turn. I might get through those too.
I think How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's that book that you need to read every several years. Terrible title, but incredibly powerful book about how to treat people. As you know, it's our father's favorite. And then to sort of hearken on your sphere is Grant by Ron Chernow. It's really about how, what is that old saying that Dad always says? You can't beat a man that's not willing to give up. And that Grant failed time and time again, but he just refused to give up, and he became one of the great figures in American history.
Yeah, I think that was Tom Sainer.
Yeah.
Tom Sainer. It's hard to beat a man who won't give up. If we put the dust jacket of Grant by Ron Chernow up, you also have to live that in order to get through it. It's about 950 pages. So it is much more of a New Year resolution to read, and it's hard to beat a man who can get all the way through that book on his first try. Next book, and you've actually done a lot of writing about this. I want to get your thought. John Moody, former executive at Fox News, former Rome bureau chief for Time magazine, wrote Of Course They Knew about China. It's a fictional account of the coronavirus and the rise of China. But it got me thinking that for all of the spy thrillers that came out in the 50s and the 60s and 70s about the Russians, so little comes out about taking on the Chinese. It's something that you've written about a lot. Why do you think that is?
Money and influence. The answers to a lot of reasons that things don't come out. The Russians didn't spend as much money and influence trying to not have their name in. In fact, actually, there's a lot of questions about part of what Russia did was they wanted to have spy movies about how amazing they are. And China has decided to go the opposite route and be a little bit quieter about their influence.
You have on this list Bridgerton, which I had never heard of, and I feel as though that makes me either not all that hip or perhaps really happy I'd never heard of it.
You know what, Lucky? I think it might help you with your love life a little bit. Wouldn't hurt you to read that one.
Wow! There we go. There we go.
I think anyone who has seen the Netflix show or read the book knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, it wouldn't hurt you.
Well, some reading perhaps from my list as well. Liberty, Merry Christmas. See you soon. Thank you. To those at home, thank you for being with us for our inaugural year. We promise to continue to try hard every day to earn your trust and your viewership in the new year. We'll see you on the road a lot for 2022 for the midterms. Dan Abrams next. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.